Welcome to one of our blast sessions. These are the sessions that we set up in response to specific inquiries that we've had. And one of the repeated inquiries that we have had from students are people who are asking for guidance on how to write a scientifically rigorous introductory overview or background to their problem or the problem statement, either for your proposal or for a dissertation or for a thesis. So basically what we're looking at today is I will speak you through how you would prepare or work towards having a thorough and well-rounded introduction to either your thesis or your dissertation or indeed your proposal. And remember, folks, the difference really between each of these, between a proposal, a dissertation, and a doctoral thesis, has a lot more to do with the length of the introduction more than anything. The actual type of things that you include are about the same. So we are trying to deal with all these things in one sweeping session. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tennyson Mokuchini. I am the project leader and the facilitator, your facilitator for this evening's session. So, and one of the things to point out, I hope you've got a pen and a paper where you are, is that the nature of this session is that there aren't many slides. We will share all these slides with you, but there aren't many of them. So a lot of what you remember or hear from me will be things that you need to just make some basic notes on, or better still, you can rely on the recordings that we have and revisit it through the recordings. I will turn off my camera in a short while, just so that we can focus exclusively on the presentation without you having two visual outputs to look at. So just for the purposes of restating things, as all of you know, you have the opportunity on the conversation chat to input your questions, and please capture those as soon as you can, because normally, or at least with this type of session, I have the ability to kind of respond to things as I see them come up. But so just to foreground this session, you will, and I think I've said this many a time, the idea around all your research is that you should mentally position yourself as having a topic that only you believe in. So the way that you introduce the topic is to literally market it to the reader using scientific approaches to market it. So what I am going to do is to speak you through how you utilize the introduction of your work as that piece that markets your study. When I say market it, I mean you are actually giving substantive confirmation that the problem you've chosen is indeed worthy of attention as a research focus. So the types of things that you do are exclusively to do with the types of things that you do are exclusively to do with focusing the reader in on your problem in ways that make for a very, very easy to digest consumption of whatever it is that you're sharing. So that's the first thing that you must focus in on, making sure that you present your introduction so that anybody, regardless of whether they are experts in your topic, anybody can see what it is that you are trying to get them to appreciate. And the priority above all is to very, very clearly state what problem your study is going to look at, and to clearly articulate the things about that phenomena that make it a worthwhile scientific problem for the world and for you in particular to be concerned about. So I can't overstate the need for an introduction to do that. It is absolutely your selling. It is your selling pitch. If you don't get it right, you don't sell the work. If you don't sell the work, you get readers who are apathetic. So they read your work, but they read it because they have to, not because they believe that there's something to be gained from it. And this is where I would like us to depart when we think our point of departure should be about you thinking, I have this little thing that I'm interested in. I, at this point, am the only one who recognizes the value of it. And I want to position my introduction so it markets the potential value of this piece of work that I'm looking at. And the way you market something is to show that it is a significant problem that deserves inquiry. And you do that in a number of ways. So I will orientate you to those ways. Then once we have got those, hopefully it will help you. Many of you by this point already have introductions. And many of you have introductions that your supervisors have read and have said, go ahead, it's okay. Many of you have introductions that you think have passed proposal stage or whatever. But I can assure you one thing, if your current introduction does not have the elements that I speak to you about, I strongly, strongly, strongly advise you to go back and sharpen it. And the reason you sharpen it, folks, is I engage expansively with examiners from all over the world. And one of the things that they consistently complain about when it comes to them reviewing work is that they know people have done dissertations, people have done theses, but they never get a very clear-cut overview of why this thesis, why this focus. They kind of read because you've submitted something, but the value of the justification behind your study is always one of the things they find to be weakest. And because those things are seen to be weakest, that's the point at which mediocre assessment outcomes start to emerge. So if your introduction is weak, then you know you will kind of get through, but you will not stand out. And the issue about this is that you all have the potential to have work that really stands out, work that really speaks to a viable problem. And this session will hopefully give you the opportunity to be better at doing this. Now, many of the things that I'm talking to you about, you have heard, because I've gone on and on and on and on about them. But we now need to think about how these things emerge within the context of your work. So literally, when you think of an introduction has several purposes. And I will share those purposes with you, and I want you to keep a pen and a paper now so you can kind of record these things. So an introduction gives the reader orientation to the problem issue that you have chosen. And when I say orientation, you are orientating the reader to the topic, how it manifests itself as a problem, How big is it? How topical? How recent? When we talk about topicality, we're saying if you have chosen an area, can you demonstrate that the problems related to it are problems that the world are currently bothered with? When I say currently bothered with, I'm expecting that if you were to go to a discipline-specific publication and you looked at the content list of what that publication is discussing, one of the issues it would be discussing won't be related to your topic because it's a here and now problem that people write about in your field. So that bit you have to demonstrate the topicality of your work in your introduction. So you're demonstrating that, hey folks, this issue that I'm talking about is indeed a problem that concerns practitioners and theorists and researchers in my field. So you do that by specifying, content from relevant people within your field who are talking about it, who are talking about its existence, the challenges it poses, and so forth. You also then have to show that your topic has relevance, and relevance is different from topicality. So topicality is about the here and the now presentation of this challenge that you're looking at, whereas relevance is much more to do with the longitudinal presence of an issue. So when you do relevance, you are actually trying to show the listener, the reader, that, hey, apart from this problem being in the news now and being a challenge now, I can show you that over the long course of time, this issue has existed as a challenge in one way or another for this area of practice that I'm in. That's relevant. So you will find that people will have an introduction that will talk about or specify how a certain topic was initially problematized in 1972, and these are the emerging issues and all of that stuff. Then the next thing that you do is to do with demonstrating the significance of a topic. And demonstrating the significance of a topic can occur in a number of ways. So the first way that you will demonstrate and must demonstrate in your introduction is the fact that this thing that you're looking at has got a global, a continental, a national, and local presentation. So if say you were going to look at a typical example, I always find something that I think will affect all of you. Okay, so if someone was studying factors that are related to what will make you pass your master's and doctorate, the way that they show that that problem is not just about all you people who are attending this session now, but it is a problem that the world are challenged by, then they could show the magnitude of that issue by citing sources of evidence that confirm that student success is a global phenomenon, a global challenge, and you speak about the way that it globally expresses itself. You would also acknowledge that student success challenges are issues that are contested and debated and fought over within the continental space. You would also do the same by demonstrating that nationally it is an area of challenge and so forth, until you actually home in on the fact that you are interested in studying this thing at University X. But even though you are saying that you are looking at this thing from the perspective of University X, you have demonstrated its global presence, that you could literally go to any university on earth and find that this issue is also a challenge for them in some shape or form. So that is a way of magnifying the problem by showing that, hey, I've chosen this topic not just because I have a personal interest in it, I have chosen it because it's actually an issue that bothers the world. So that's one way you show significance, that you show the global expression of a problem, that the problem is expressed at a global level, it's expressed at a continental level. And with all these examples of expression, the best way to do that is to make reference to little bits of data that confirm that, hey, so and so in this area of the world also considered this issue because it's challenging in this way. So remember now, your introduction has given us a sense of the fact that this topic, this thing is important, the thing you've chosen is important by virtue of it being a here and now contested issue, the topicality bit. You are showing us that it's important because it has been important throughout the ages by showing its relevance. You are now showing us that it is important because it affects the world in all sorts of ways. It affects the world, it affects the continent, the nation from which you are, and also the local context. Then the next way that people demonstrate significance is just to do with the numbers game, where you actually are able to say, look, I believe that this topic is important because it exists in this magnitude. And that's where people would show statistical patterns to say, hey, 40% of this are affected by that. So if my focus was to do with student success, the statistical significance bit would be me citing data to show us that a significant proportion of students do not succeed. And therefore, the problem of trying to get people to succeed is a serious enough problem because it affects such high percentages of people. Of course, there are ways in which you can actually further excite people with numbers. So some people will show that a problem is big, but if a problem has worsened over time, they can show that it's both big and it's increasing by the day. So then that whole thing to do with using numbers, excuse me, to show how a problem is significant can be turned in a number of ways, because you are able to say, here are the numbers, they are bad enough as they are, and guess what? Last year they were less bad, so we can confirm that year on year we actually have a risk of this thing getting bigger and bigger. And if you can show that this is a serious enough trend, then you are showing that at least at a numbers level, the problem that you're looking at is definitely worthy of being worried about. Now, not all problems are important because they are plentiful or they exist in high numbers. Some problems become important by the nature of how the problem plays itself out. So I will take a topic such as, say if you were doing a study to do with abductions of children by one of their parents. This happens. It's not as common as all that in terms of the statistical appearance of it when compared to how many mothers and fathers exist out there. So you would find that if you were to look, probably 0.0001% of all children are at risk of being abducted by one of their parents. So that number is fairly small, but the actual experience and the damage associated even with one abduction has been portrayed in literature as being so disturbing that actually it is not the number of abductions that concern us, it is the nature of the impact that abductions have, irregardless of whether it's one we're talking about or 100. So in that respect, what you are showing is that this topic is important, not because it's plentiful or it has a high number. You are saying it's important because it represents a significantly disturbing or problematic life event. Now, all these things that I have mentioned, topicality, relevance, the global spread of a problem, the statistical presentation in terms of the numbers, the nature of the problem in terms of how horrific it is. All those things are called problem magnifiers. They allow you to take your problem and to show angles about it that will hook people into believing that, oh goodness, this is really indeed a problem. Now, not every topic possesses viability in relation to all the magnifiers. So all of you are probably sitting, you've got your own topic, and you're thinking, hey, I can demonstrate topicality in my problem, but this problem is only 1 year old, so I can't really demonstrate long-term relevance because it's a new problem. But then you find you can demonstrate the other things. So ultimately, what happens when you magnify the problem is that it is how well you can show in your introductory overview the things about the issue that you're looking at that make it an important consideration. Now, those things don't need to be all 4 or 5 things that I've mentioned. It can be as many as you can do. Of course, if the issue you've chosen scores 0 on all the things, it is not topical, it is not relevant, you can't demonstrate statistical significance, you can't show that the nature of it is problematic, you can't confirm that it's a problem at a global level in any shape or form. If you have a problem that's got those, then actually the secret is tear up the paper and go find another topic. That's basically what the idea is. And the more of these magnifiers you have in a single topic, the more you are saying that, look, this work that I'm proposing is non-negotiable, because look at it. It's reeking with problems left, right, and center. So then on the basis of that, we will speak. I will then talk to you about how the way that you would write out the actual introductory part. Then I will speak to you about the way that you specify your problem, the statement of your problem, and so forth. So, of course, here there are things that refer to the aim of your study and so forth. That was from a different session. Now, I always say to people, nothing you do in research can happen without you leaning on the most basic expectations of research. And the most basic expectations are that the way you write or engage or do anything in research must be founded in a systematic space. It should be driven by some systematic appreciation of how things work. It should be characterized by rigor. So everything you do, you present and you question it from very differing angles all throughout your presentation of it. And of course, it should be driven by logical presentation of things. So when we say this idea that things are logical means that you must have quite a deliberate way of making sure that when you develop something, you actually plan it out, so that there is a logic that one follows. And ordinarily, there are certain systems that people refer to. Say if you were going to talk about the existence of a problem, there is a system that people talk about that they call funneling system. So you start from the big, you end up with the small, in the very same way that you use a funnel. So that if that becomes a system you adopt, everything you write in your introduction, you'll start with the big problem, how it plays itself in the world. You give statistics about the world picture. You draw it closer and closer and closer until you get to statistics about the way the problem plays out in your individual space. Then the rigor bit means that everything you present, you should appreciate has got many other ways of being seen, and we expect from you as a conscientious researcher that you will make representation of all those positions. So when we say rigor, if, say, for example, you are writing about a particular issue and you're making the case that all the people who have studied it have failed to make any progress, you should be willing to open up the possibility of you discussing entities and individuals who have made progress in some shape or way. So you kind of you use this aspiration for rigor to force your conversation in your work to include even the viewpoints that you yourself don't believe in. And the reason you do that is you're really aspiring for this holistic picture of what's going on, even if what's going on is not in line with your preferred way of thinking about things. Now, okay. Now, what I want to specify is that the introduction of your work serves a number of purposes. Firstly, I said it was to give a background to the problem that you are focusing on. So you give a background to the thing that you have decided to name and classify as a problem. That issue that you have chosen as your subject matter, the issue that you have chosen as your field of interest, you must give an overview of it. And the introduction allows that. Secondly, you then propose within your introduction, you give an overview of the methods and approaches that are going to be used to understand this issue that you have chosen. So the introduction also acts as a roadmap. That when someone reads an introduction, yes, they get a sense of the overview of the challenges, the problem, the issues that are being contested. But in addition to that, they get insights, a roadmap. It's almost like a summary of the upcoming future as far as your study is concerned. So people get access to this roadmap that specifies what will occur in the study. So you'll find that apart from your introduction giving an overview of how big the problem is, all those other things I spoke about, the introduction also tells the reader in some shape or form what happens in the study that is coming. Whether it's for a study where you've already done things or whether it's for a proposal. If it's for a proposal, the introduction also offers the reader a sense of what is going to be coming in terms of the methodologies that you're going to propose. But so we know the introduction gives an overview of the topic, the challenges, the questions, and so forth, but it also gives an opportunity for a succinct, summarized roadmap of the study. So if you went to introductions, you would see that the introductions eventually end up just giving some insights into the methods that were used, the steps that were followed, some of the methodological choices that were made in relation to particular things about a study. So really the introduction is, let me bring you in, show you the problem, show you the issues about the problem that I was interested in, and then very quickly give you a summarized roadmap of how I dealt with this thing as I was starting to study it. And that is why when you look at introductions, you find that in some introductions, there's quite a substantial amount of things that belong to the methodology section. Some of them belong to other chapters. So it then becomes a chapter that showcases what is coming. Now, right. Okay, so now I want to do something that is not on here. And this is another bit that I would like you to just pay attention to. So remember, I said we are going to walk you through what an introduction will look like. And this walking through, unfortunate or fortunate in some ways, is going to come from my head. So I need, for me to do this, I need to actually have a working topic that I put forward so I can show you and demonstrate some of the things that need to be focused on. So let us assume that the problem that we're looking at relates to the failure rates of students. And I'm trying to understand the challenges that exist in relation to making students succeed. So issue one in an introduction is I must give you a way of selling the problem, selling that problem in such a way that even anyone who is not a student or people who are not themselves at risk as students feel some type of empathy with the topic. So the first thing then I would start to do is to say, hey, universities are seen as the places that produce our world's future, the future of the world. That really there's lots of literature to show that universities are looked upon as the places that generate knowledge for the future. They develop future leaders, they do all sorts of things. But all of them are gripped with a number of challenges. And the most serious of those challenges is the fact that many of the people who enter universities enter but do not succeed, nor do they complete. And then I would draw an evidence to show what percentages of non-successful people exist. And then I talk about the fact that when people don't succeed in education, they get exposed to all sorts of other unhealthy options that exist. So much so that there's evidence to show that people who don't complete university education have a reduced life expectancy by anything from 5 years to 15 years, depending on what country you're in. So I've roundabout said to you that actually, the fact that we have people who fail in universities and they don't do well and they drop out has in some way connected to an increased risk of people dying early. That's kind of what I've taken with this. So I've really drawn out and pulled out the full extent to which this issue that I'm looking at could exist. That this issue, of course, people can fail and they can be disappointed in their room, but there are wider and more substantive expressions of this problem. Then I will talk about how there's ongoing substantial, what's this evidence that student failure rates are increasing year on year, and that there's lots of research to suggest that unless we start to understand this better, the situation will worsen and worsen and worsen. And there'll be research that shows that we currently don't have a very good understanding of what seminal challenges exist and which of those challenges are responsible for the ultimate decision to drop out. So that is me painting an initial picture of the story. I will cite numbers to show that there's an international expression of this, show that there's a continental expression of this, talk about the country and so forth, and end at the very closest of places by citing anecdotal experiences, the things that I have seen in my practice that confirm that this issue is indeed a problem, even as close to me as my arm's length. Now, I want to also demonstrate that this problem is contested. So I would present views that say, hey, Some believe that challenges are to do with this. Others believe that they are that. Consider the different positions that are expressed. Also then indicate that there are some areas where there's so much disagreement that actually they represent an apparent knowledge gap. Then, of course, in an ideal world, that knowledge gap that I identify would be the gap that I'm saying my current study will be trying to address. All this is in the initial presentation of the background to the study. Some people do an introduction as the first subheading. Maybe they say background to the problem of student dropout as the next thing. Maybe the next thing is to show the magnitude and existence of the problem of student success. Then maybe the next part is that they look at emerging challenges that relate to student success. All of that becomes the introduction, how you lay out the problem. And I've used as many of those magnifiers that I spoke about as possible. And now once I've done that, and I've acknowledged that there is indeed a problem that relates to people not doing well, and us not being clear in understanding what the challenges are. Then you now get to a section where you must write up what we call the problem statement or the statement of the problem. Basically, a problem statement is a very short summation of the things that are going on which culminate in the problem that you need to study. So a problem statement will very quickly confirm that student success or student failure is a serious challenge that we don't understand. They draw attention to 2 or 3 sources that confirm that. They will confirm also that very little work has been done to look at the exact nature of challenges that affect students, or the problem may be that there's lots of work, but none of the work can consistently arrive at the same challenges. So there's need for someone who can kind of revisit this thing so they can see where the truth lies. Or you may actually be saying, look, there is work, but the work is contests or refuses to agree about the challenges. Or you might be saying that there is work and the work appears to agree about the challenges, but somehow it looks like the picture of student success is worsening, even though we think we understand what it is that causes or makes this be expressed. Or you might even go a little bit further by saying, hey, the problem exists. It's been looked at. There is disagreement about how best to go, or there is agreement, but the agreement has been sought and received and concluded on in spaces that are outside of this culture where I'm carrying out this study. And that's the bit where you would put in an angle about the fact that, hey, maybe the challenges that have been spoken about are challenges that would typically affect students in Western contexts, not within a South African context. So you then spin the problem as being about the fact that, yes, this thing has been studied, but there is a need for a much more culturally relevant and context appropriate way of understanding this. So you realize that that problem can exist from a number of things. And in your statement that you put, you could be saying that there's a problem in that we don't understand challenges because we continue to disagree, or you don't understand them because you agree, but things seem to still be getting worse, or you don't understand them because it appears that all the work that has been done so far utilized examples and contexts that are not directly relevant to the area where you want the study to focus. So that essentially is how you paint in that bit where you are saying, look, I want to summarize now that there's this problem has been looked at, we continue to fight about it, and we're fighting in these ways, and we continue to have little or no understanding of how to resolve it. And because of this problem, I, the researcher, find myself in a position where I'm compelled to propose or to carry out a study whose aim is to. Then you provide the aim of the study. But all that initial bit that I spoke about relates to you setting the scene about the study, setting the scene about the problem, and clarifying exactly in a statement format what the exact problem that you are focusing on is and how it has come to be. So that is your introduction. That is your research problem as far as the introductory bit comes. Of course, once you have covered this research problem and you've given us the problem and used all these things that I've spoken about, demonstrating global existence and so forth, you come to the place where you make a declaration now that you say, hey, given that I actually want to understand this thing better, I found myself carrying out a study whose aim was to clarify, to understand, to explore the causal relationship between A, B, C, D, or whatever. So your aim becomes the thing that after you've spelled out the problem, you've noticed that there's a challenge of the thing not being understood, you then say, okay, now that we know what the problem is, and we've stated it in the problem statement, I can now offer you the aim that I have or had when I decided to research this issue. And that's the point at which you present your aim. Then you say, look, to get to this aim, there are a number of objectives that the study had, and these are the objectives, and you specify those in your introduction. You give us in objectives, which you will have, by the way, from your proposal. So you include them in there. Some of the objectives or some instances will require that you present the objectives and also research questions or and so forth. Typically, quantitative studies use objectives and qualitative studies use questions. But I have to say that normally the requirements at universities are so generic now that people just provide both things because they can't quite tell what the preferred one is. So now that you've painted all these things, after you've told us the objectives, then the rest of your chapter becomes a roadmap to you, giving in a summarized way the things that you carried out in your study in pursuit of these objectives. So you would then give us an overview of your methodologies. This is what methodological design that was used. We use these data collection approaches. We analyzed the work using this way. We dealt with ethical principles in this way within the study. Then you finalize that first chapter by saying, so this was the overall introductory bit. All the other upcoming chapters will give you an overview of all the other things that happen with the study. And for clarity, here's a summative overview of the chapters that are upcoming. Then you have a little overview that tells the reader that chapter 1 is the introduction, chapter 2 is the literature review, and so forth and so forth. But that is literally, folks, how you rise and get to this issue of the problem of your study and how you move from conceptualizing the problem to you actually giving an overview of the entire piece of work that you've got to consider. So now, given that that's what we have, I want us to open up this space for us to consider your questions. And because we've literally, in this very short, apparently short session, I'm able to give an overview of how you deal with the issue of articulating the problem of your study, speaking to and doing it rigorously, hey? And rigor means really allowing all perspectives to be given an opportunity to be expressed, giving a background to the problem, how it came about, the whole topicality story, and all of those things. So that is what, okay, let me get to here now. Right, we shall very quickly look at this. I'm going to try and generate, apply and turn on video. Right, I'm going to now try to open up the questions that have been put up in relation to this topic area, and I will respond to those. Okay, there's a comment that has been made by Adam, where he says, I suppose the overview to be given in the introduction is just like what we do as literature review in our proposals. Adam, the truth is somewhere in the middle. For the most part, yes, but you have to pay close attention to some entities have proposal requirements that ask for a separate introduction than a literature review. The two things are actually very closely connected, so much so that sometimes people can't tell where one begins and where one ends. But if I were to guide you about how you differentiate one from the other, the introduction gives a background overview of the topic that's being looked at. It gives a background of the topic that's being looked at in terms of how it came about, the numbers, that whole thing of magnifying the issue. That's what the introduction does. Whereas, and the introduction magnifies the wider subject field that you're concerned with, but there may be a very specific question within that. So, for example, in my topic that I gave you, my introduction would speak quite broadly about student success, student failure, the importance of it, and so forth and so forth. But the literature review would speak more specifically about the challenges that exist in relation to dropout. So then that part that relates to dropout becomes the subject of my literature review. But whereas the introduction included the wider consideration of all these other things. So that's basically how it is. But in essence, you are right that the overview and the literature review literally look about the same. But if you're going to differentiate one, from the other, you would notice that the introduction in general terms is really an overview of someone problematizing what it is that they're looking at and doing it in such a way as to market the problem. Whereas the literature review is it's a review of the state of debates as they relate to the thing that you have looked at. So a literature review within a paper tends to be about contested issues in the here and now, whereas the background and introduction is about this issue as contested from many years ago, coming up to now. You have been clear enough for me. I have no questions. Thank you very much. We've had someone who's observed this, right? Okay, so the question here is that is the background to the problem statement for a thesis or dissertation the same as that of a research paper? Folks, they are not exactly the same, and the reason they are not the same is that in a thesis or dissertation, you have the option of unlimited word edge. You can write for as long as you want, so you can paint a slow progressive picture. You can show the problem from every possible facet that exists. But in a journal article, you have to hit us with the most impactful of those things. So a journal article background is almost like a summary of the background you would have for a dissertation or thesis. So the version that you have within the context of an article is much sharper. It's much more to the point and all those things, hey? Secondly, at what point should the introduction or chapter 1 be written? Some supervisors advise that it should be the last part to be written during the course of thesis writing. Samuel, as I've said, usually this thing about extracting guidance from people is about opinion. But I will share what my opinion is and my experience of it. And of course, I have been doing this specific doctoral work that I am doing now for 19 years or so. I've seen a fair amount of it. But here's what I say. Chapter 1 is literally written in any case because your proposal, when you look at your proposal and you look at what I've described, it is essentially chapter 1. It's just chapter 1 written in the future tense. It's you saying, oh, I'm going to. Whereas with chapter 1, you say, I did do this. So in actual fact, chapter 1 is written when you do the proposal. By virtue of you having done the proposal, you've got the makings of a chapter 1. Typically, people complete that in any case because you are sort of warming up yourself for the upcoming chapters. So chronologically, it makes sense to write chapter 1. But it is that one chapter that when you've finished your entire thesis or your entire dissertation, you go back to it to review whether it still sounds as sharp as it did. Is it still current? Do the promises that you make in chapter 1 reflect the things that you actually did and said in other chapters? So the issue about writing it in terms of order, it naturally is written first because it already exists in the form of a kind of partially proposal thing. But you are mindful of the fact that you will ultimately have to refine it at the very end of your work. And then, of course, everything else that you do is in chronology. But chapter 2 sometimes is laborious, so much so that people will start chapter 3 while they are waiting for chapter 2 to fully materialize. Yeah, so here we go. Now, Prof, can you kindly give the specific outline? Okay, I thought I had done that, eh? Look, someone's asked me to give a specific outline or organization of chapter 1 for a doctoral thesis. I thought I had, when I've said take a paper and keep a count of that, that's exactly what I was doing, eh? So I ask that you kind of revisit the work I've done. The first part of the chapter is to do with you setting up all the introductory bits, the introduction, the overview of the problem, the magnitude of the problem. You can decide where you put in subheadings and so forth. Some people will say the debated issues, then eventually you get to a space where you now tell us about the statement of the problem. After you've done that, you tell us about the aim of the study. Then you put in the objectives, the research questions. Then you tell us the methodological issues. So you tell us the design, You have a section where you tell us about the data collection methods, the ethical or the context where the study was carried out. You give us an overview of the ethical considerations. Then you give us an overview of the actual thesis. So that's broadly what happens. But look, folks, and I say this over and over and over and over again. Don't ever embark on doing a doctoral thesis or a master's thesis without having had sight or read 3 or 4 other doctorates and theses in your field. Why embark on a journey without any guidance when actually you've got a repository full of these things that you should go and look at so that you get structure from other successful things? And once you get their structure, it's easy then to improve your structure. So at the very least, your work is as good as, if not substantially better than, the other work that has already been passed. There's a question that says, how long in terms of wording of pages should the intro background problem statement be? Folks, this question is impossible to answer because firstly, in this world of writing dissertation and theses, there are variants. There are people doing a mini report. There are people doing a mini dissertation. There are people doing a dissertation of limited scope. There are people doing a full master's dissertation. There are people doing a 5-chapter thesis. There are some people doing a 7-chapter thesis. All those exist in one way or form. And the only thing I can tell you, and I restate again, is that if you are in a specific field that has a specific requirement, look at others to see what people do. But I just know personally, when it comes to a doctorate, that I've very rarely found a doctoral study that is complete and meets all the requirements and is less than 350, 400 pages. Anytime it's less than that, there's a feeling that they've missed something. But that is a ballpark number. And what I say to you above all is go to the repository for your specific field. And you cannot be anywhere in your journey and tell me that you're sitting here today and you have not read a good 3 theses or three dissertations, because you need that to paint a good picture of relativity. So, Prof, there wouldn't be a problem if I do not have objectives. This is a question for Adam, from Adam. So, in a purest research mode, they say that objectives are statements that are made by people in quantitative spaces, whereas questions are asked by people who are in an exploratory qualitative space. So if you're being supervised by a pure qualitative researcher, they should be happy with you only having questions. But the reality is that very rarely do you meet people who understand their methodological alignment so well that they will say, let's only work with this. And similarly, there are things like in a qualitative study, people will talk more, they should talk more about the purpose of a study as opposed to the aim and so forth. But you will find that people are mixing and matching all of those. And that is more to do with people having lost the pure science of how to write studies. So to protect yourself, if you have questions, it's easy to turn questions into objectives. You just take the questions and you write them as a statement rather than a question. And that's it. So for me, I say to you, for the purposes of being safe, include them both. But if you were to sit in a quiz about purest behavior, then you would answer the way that I have guided you. What are the common mistakes that students make about topic development? So folks, many people, Dudus is asked, what are the common mistakes that people make when they develop a topic? The most common things that happen is people have topics that they've developed with little or very limited prior reading of the space that they're interested in. So you cannot assume that something you've seen being a problem that plays out in your everyday life is indeed a substantive problem that affects your field. You only know that it's a problem because you have got anecdotal personal experience. So it's like me meeting two UNISA students and they are rude to me. Then I make a decision that rudeness is a rampant issue among students at UNISA or at universities in the whole. I can't come to that conclusion until I go and read up on literature about student behavior, until I get some other external confirmatory evidence. So most people base their studies on assumptions that are false, have not been proven, and are weak. So that's the first thing. The second issue is that many people come into the research space as practitioners and not as researchers. A researcher is very much like a journalist. Hey, your job is to watch and understand your subject of interest. And once you decide what that subject of interest is, only focus on that subject of interest. But practitioners or people who come from a practice context can't seem to narrow down their problems. So they just have a research study that's about fixing everything. They want to understand why the world is round and so forth and so forth and so forth. Then they find that they are everywhere. And more than anything, you would rather have a very narrow focus and understand that narrow focus exceptionally well than have a wide focus and have superficial understanding of that wide focus. Then, of course, the other thing with topic development is this idea that every time you develop a problem or you have a problem, you really need to think it out all the way to study completion before you can decide that this is my topic. And what I mean is that if you decide this is a topic you want, you have to ask yourself, so if I'm interested in this topic, what will the aim of my study be? What are some of the typical objectives? What are the likely data collection approaches? What are the likely ways I would analyze data? What are the likely findings that I would have? So you actually play out that topic to its conclusion, because poor topics, when you play them out, halfway through you playing out, you suddenly realize that, oh, I can't do this because it won't allow me to play the music of the topic all the way to the end of the research process. Prof, do we need to have clarification of key concepts in chapter 1? Yes, you do. So remember, if you look, for the most part, many of you will come from remember, it's chapter 1 is you setting the scene. So one of the things that you do to set the scene is to clarify concepts. You clarify concepts. You clarify concepts by virtue of explaining them. And also, you define the key concepts that are engaged within your work. But more importantly, you also include what we call operational definitions. So take, for example, an operational definition is where you have a concept that you have redefined for the purposes of study. So someone will say, look, I'm studying student failure. Maybe studies have said student failure involves people who drop out. But you yourself in your study might be calling student failure as people who actually may not drop out but are dissatisfied in the study area that they're in. They are grossly unhappy in that field. So your definition of student failure is somehow slightly different from what the textbooks write. So that difference will be referred to as an operational definition. You've operationalized, you've revised the original definitions so that the definition can be more operationally relevant to your topic and to your focus. but you do include those because they're part of you setting the scene. Folks, if you have research objectives, how you turn research objectives is to literally take that objective, which is a statement, and turn it into a question. So if your first objective is to determine the nature of this problem, the corresponding research question is, what is the nature of problem X? If your statement is to explore the perceptions of so and so, then the question that relates to that is, what are the perceptions of this? So in a study, if you have 4 objectives, in all likelihood, you will have 4 questions because each objective can be turned into a question. So that's the relationship. That's how you do those things. But questions tend to be much more predominantly utilized in qualitative studies, whereas objectives are much more natively utilized in quantitative studies. But as I've said, because the people who mark your work or the people who engage in your work are themselves not as purist in their understanding of this, it is better for you to include both questions and objectives just to cover yourself. Of course, as we become much and more refined, the phraseology, each design has got different phases it uses, so phrases that it uses. So quantitative research might talk about the impact of something, because in quantitative research, the concepts of impact analysis, analyzing impact and all that are all quantitative concepts. But if you were studying impact, but you were studying it in the context of a qualitative study, you might not talk about it as impact in a qualitative study. You would talk about it as the influence of, or something like that. So it does matter. Ironically, in mixed method research, remember, mixed method research is essentially the existence of both a qualitative element and a quantitative element in a study. Sometimes they exist at the same time, sometimes they exist one after the other, sometimes they exist one inside the other. Whatever the story is, the elements that are qualitative, you treat them using qualitative rules. The elements that are quantitative, you treat them using quantitative rules. So in essence, in a mixed method study, if we were to follow the pure version of doing this, you would have a mixture of research questions and a mixture of research objectives. But because, once again, I've said, folks, do both to be safe, it literally doesn't matter. How about the scope and delimitations in chapter 1? Yes, look, folks, the actual detail of the little sections that matter, what I suggest you do is just go to a pre-existing past thesis in your space and look at the subheadings they've got, emulate them and increase on them. Some departments have a structure that they pursue and pursue and pursue. I need a private tutor to guide me with the thesis. Look, folks, that private tutor that you need is literally meant to be your supervisor. So if there's something that is not happening, then we provide these classes to assist you with that. But really, the formal route is that your supervisor is that private tutor. If you're dissatisfied with them, you of course have avenues that you would utilize within your department, not through this program, to allow you to find alternatives to your supervisor. But all I can tell you is that this program is covering and attending to things in ways that a supervisory relationship probably wouldn't have time to. So some people will utilize these sessions as a way that they begin to build their confidence around things. If I do not finish my 5 chapters this year, do I continue next year using the same registration? Registration is year on year. So you take 5 years, you pay for 5 registrations. You take 3 years, you pay for 3 registrations. How do I get the latest authors? Piece, you search for them you search for them on the internet. You use search engines. Mahotla, thank you, Prof, for presentation. Thank you very much, Mahotla. You have not dealt with the rationale for the study and its significance. Are they covered in the introduction? I have dealt with them. Folks, remember now, I have dealt with how you problematize. I said you have to sell the study. So when you are selling the study, you are giving a rationale for why the study exists. So that is included. The significance of the study is something that towards the end of your chapter 1, you might have a section where you say, look, not might, you will definitely have a section where you say, look, this study that you're doing has the potential of contributing X and Y to this field of study. But all those things have already been primed when you were describing the problem, because you extended how the problem looks like. You proved that this problem needs to be studied. So it follows that you are saying that your study's presence is that it has an important role in allowing for this issue to be studied. And finally, you also have to have an overview of for those doing their doctorate, you need to have a section that talks about the unique contribution that your study will make. And that uniqueness relates to how your study will contribute new understanding. It might have new methodologies that have not been adopted before. And once again, this is something that you must look at previously accepted theses and try to better what they said, to do more than what they did. Because if you expand and extend beyond them, then you can't go wrong. There's someone who's saying addressing global, continental, national, and industry levels of background. Is there a criteria for identification? Folks, now this is the time where you must take all the lectures that you've had from this and use them to inform your decision making. Remember, there is a lecture where we spoke about reviewing literature. I spoke to you about a hierarchy of evidence, and I said there's something that was developed by a man called Sackett, and that hierarchy allows you to say, hey, opinion is the least credible, the most credible is a systematic review, and so forth and so forth. So when you are showing that things exist, you use particular literary sources, and if you need to, you can draw comparisons between each other by making a reference to the type of data source that you found these from. So folks, that is the story. Now, I think we're good to go. I am looking, I'm not seeing anything that immediately comes up. Folks, when you write, when you write these things, of course, you will not remember everything. And what I always tell people is that, look, go find yourself a really good thesis that when you read, you get clarity about the problem. You get a sense of conviction about what the person was studying, clarity about methodology and so forth. Then you make that your blueprint. You look at it and you look at it as a low entry level blueprint. So everything that this example you've got did, you do twice as well. And if you do that, there's just no way you'll go wrong. Trust me, never. And along with these sessions, you will do exceptionally well. Okay. Now, folks, I think we're good to go. It's 7:15. I want to thank you for attending this session. And as you will know, I think we have one session a week. that focuses on specific challenges and things. So you will get the next set of presentations coming up. I think Wednesday, same time, same place, we will share once again what the topic or subject matter that's been voted in for discussion is. And I want to thank you for allowing yourself or giving time to attend today. I will just very quickly make sure that I say the right thing. The next sessions we have we have one on the 29th and the 30th of September. If I'm not mistaken, I think I will need to, we have sessions on the 29th and the 30th. And folks, we also must remind you all again that we have a YouTube channel whose details have been shared with you, and I'm sure my team will share with you again, and you are able to access the recordings from there. You're also able to, we are hoping that when we have our next sessions, we will get an opportunity to get some feedback opportunities from you, so we understand how you've experienced this journey that we have provided for you. Thank you very much. As I say once again, I want to wish you a great evening, and look forward to seeing you next on the 29th. And of course, we will circulate the information about this. Have a great evening. Let's see. May I have a master's presentation from music? Folks, all these things are available through your departmental repository. So there's no facility within our service that will get dissertations for you. You will be able to obtain. You will be able to obtain these, and literally, if you use the UNISA online library and you look for repositories, you will find that there's repository there. The very least is you write to your supervisor and you say, dear supervisor, I want to make sure my work is better than other students, and I think I need a reference point. Do you have an example, or can you guide me to a space where I can get viable examples that you think represent good exemplary work? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, folks. I want to wish you a good night once again, and we'll see you on the 29th. Take care.